what if Kamala Harris is our president in January of 2025? How much worse does this get?
These guys tend to believe that the government, the state is all powerful, deciding we will dictate to the American people what will take place on a whole host of fronts. So if you think the administrative state is becoming a bad actor, and I think it's been a bad actor for a long time, have some people in the White House that are fully on the same page with the administrative state actors, with this unbelievable power to dictate to the American people. Yep, sorry, no more gas stoves. Sorry, you can all have to have electric vehicles. Actually, social credit scores, you've been very naughty online, so we're going to have to restrict your travel. I can see all of this happening.
Welcome to the Michele Tafoya podcast.
Well, this isn't Ned Ryun's first rodeo. He's written a number of books, but this one, American Leviathan, is very important. Let me give you a sense of it in this paragraph. But what is the right size and scope of government for us today? Not for anywhere except the United States. That's the real question, and one that needs to be fleshed out, starting from the notions that government should be limited in size and scope, that those unelected bureaucrats who staff the government are actually beneath and accountable to the people's duly elected representatives, that those representatives delegated authority by the American people are the ones who should actually be governing, and that the government, which is of, by, and for the people, should actually work to advance the interests and priorities of the American people. We're not there right now. How do we get there? How did we get here? And what's at stake in this election? You're going to really enjoy listening to Ned Ryun. He is next. Ned Ryun, welcome back. I'm really excited about your book, American Leviathan. I've been reading it, and it's a little scary, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And the ideas in it you've put them together so well. Tell people about the title and why you called it this.
So I appreciate being with you. Thank you so much. I really am looking forward to this conversation. So I wanted to call it Leviathan because in the second definition, the first definition of Leviathan is obviously the sea monster, the sea beast from the Old Testament. The second definition is about a vast political totalitarian state with a vast bureaucracy. That is the second definition of Leviathan. And wanted to just put a very fine point on it. We have our own American Leviathan in regards to a vast, sprawling bureaucracy that I think has become very authoritarian. And the reason I say that, Michele, is this, and I'm not trying to actually be sensational with that. I'm trying to be very clear on one front. When you have unelected, unaccountable people who are doing the real governing with consolidated power, it tends to become authoritarian. And that is the entire point of the progressives' administrative state from day one in the early 1900s. They rejected the Constitution. They did not believe in the moral and political authority of it. They hated the machinery of the Republic, which was put in place very specifically, in which there was separation of powers, diffusion of power, and we can talk about that. They rejected all of that because they believed that would hinder progress. And in its place, they put in an administrative state, this massive bureaucracy, and the only separation they were interested in was separating out that administrative state from any political accountability, i.e. elections, any accountability to the American people, and then empowering those unelected bureaucrats to do the real governing of the country. That was the whole point. And I have to tell you, Michele, in my research for this book and the writing of it, I'm kind of stunned that we didn't get to this point earlier in our history, in which it's kind of broken into the open now, where we're confronted by this reality that a lot of unelected bureaucrats think they're the ones that decide, think they're the ones that govern. And it was really the election of Donald J. Trump and him being inaugurated in January of 2017 that brought this to the surface.
You know, you hear about these things, they happen slowly and then all at once, like there is some sort of tipping point. And
yes,
you keep using the word they, I think in relation to progressives.
Yes.
Who were sort of the first progressives with whom this started back in the early 1900s?
So, Michele, you have to understand progressives got a lot of their ideology and thinking from a Prussian propagandist. I refuse to call him a philosopher, Georg Hegel, who believed that the state was the march of God on earth, who believed that the state was a source of objective truth and science, and all of the things flowed from the state, because Hegel believed that the state was salvation. And the reason these early progressives, who I'll talk about in a second, got imbued with these ideas is because in the late 1800s, we did not have the college and university system in the United States that we have today. So to get an advanced degree, you had to go to Europe. A lot of them went to France. A lot of them went to Prussia.
That's true. Yeah.
And in Prussia, Georg Hegel's ideas were being pushed through the state-controlled university system. So Woodrow Wilson and some of these other guys got these ideas and said, this is the solution for our country coming into the 20th century. This is how we will have greater progress. This is how we will reach perfection of mankind. Let's leave behind these old ways of a constitutional republic and its separation of powers that will slow progress. Let's leave behind the idea of a rights-based government in which there's a belief that our rights come from a creator, that they are unalienable, and that to secure those rights, not to give them, not to take them away, but to secure those rights, governments are instituted among men. So Woodrow Wilson, Herbert Crowley, Robert La Follette, Theodore Roosevelt, I would make the point, Michelle, 3 of those 4 men that I just mentioned are Republicans. This was not a Republican versus Democrat governing philosophy. This is really the beginning of the uniparty that I like to say adheres to a governing philosophy regardless of party affiliation. It's been around for over 100 years. And so I discussed those 4 men. I discussed Frank Goodnow. I discussed John Burgess. Some of those names are not familiar, but to put a fine point on John Burgess, Michelle, he was a law professor at Columbia. His students included Theodore Roosevelt. He is considered the father of political science in this country, yet he vehemently rejected the idea of a rights-based government and truly believed in one of Georg Hegel's poisonous ideas and the apotheosis of mankind in the here and now, which means literally the perfection. They thought we could go to a higher plane through the salvation of the state. That's the father of political science here in America. So I think we might want to re-examine the whole study of political science, knowing who the founder of it was.
Yeah, no question. And this idea that we could reach a state of perfection when man is inherently imperfect.
Correct.
You know, we're human beings. We're not perfect. But you do see that. You do see this extension of government, these agencies trying to just chisel out perfection out of everyone. And it becomes to the point where you feel you can't move almost without being governed by one of these agencies.
But that's the point. And the point from day one with progressives and their administrative state is, again, they believed that the state was a living organism that should subsume everything. Yeah. Corporations, individuals' rights, because the state was salvation. And you should not limit salvation, again, as progressives think. So therefore, it's in the DNA of the administrative state for perpetual growth, because why would you ever want to limit salvation? Salvation should come to all aspects of our life, whether it's healthcare or education, you name it, literally every aspect of our life. And until salvation comes to every aspect of our lives, the state must grow.
Wait, so what do you mean by salvation?
Literally, they thought, again, going back to perfection of mankind, they thought they were going to build the kingdom of God on this earth. And that we would somehow, their idea of history was that we are on a constant upward climb towards the end of history, that at the end of history, which would be achieved by this perfectly rational administrative state filled with an educated elite who through applied science, were going to lead all of us to a state of perfection. And it's insane to even talk about the deification of mankind in the here and now, but that was central to some of their thinking. And again, completely opposed to where our founders believed human nature was. As you mentioned, we're imperfect human beings in an imperfect world. We're capable of great good. We're incapable of sustained good. And the other thing that the founders got right, they knew that we often do what we can, not what we should. So imperfect human beings, a relatively small group of imperfect human beings, should never be trusted with consolidated power. Therefore, the diffusion of power, because guess what, Michelle? The founders didn't even trust themselves. Sitting in Philadelphia, 1787, they could have created a government that benefited them. They did the exact opposite.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, the founding and how it's supposed to work. Like, we're a democratic republic, supposedly.
Correct. Representative democracy.
So what is that supposed to look like? I think people will be surprised at how stripped down that really is supposed to look compared to what we're looking at today. You know what is a huge problem for people these days? Sleeping. And I know I have that same issue. My schedule, responsibilities, my recent shoulder surgery. I do have problems sleeping, but I found something to help me sleep better. And it's not a drug, it's not a prescription, it's a cream. Okay, stay with me. I put this cream on at bedtime. It's simple. I was really skeptical, but the first time I tried it, I was amazed that it really works and I sleep great. Okay, so the company is Sleep Cream, and they use all natural CBD combined with the finest essential oils. The stuff smells really good. I just rub it on before turning in for the evening. Bottoms of my feet, inside of my forearms. You want to use those sort of delicate skin areas. And within minutes, I am relaxed. My body is chill and I'm able to sleep. You can find them at sleepcream.com, and that's CREME. Just try Sleep Cream for a couple nights. See if it works for you as well as it does for me. If you don't experience better sleep, Sleep Cream will refund your purchase, guaranteed. You don't have to return anything. Go to sleepcream.com. That's sleepcream.com with CREME. That's how you spell cream.com. And for the next few weeks, use the code GAMEDAY at checkout to save $20 off your first order. That's GAMEDAY, all one term, at checkout, $20 savings. Are you ready for your best sleep ever? Sleep, CREME.com, sleepcream.com. Let's talk about that, the founding and how it's supposed to work. Like, we're a democratic republic, supposedly.
Correct. Representative democracy.
Representative democracy. So what is that supposed to look like? I think people will be surprised at how stripped down that really is supposed to look compared to what we're looking at today.
So in a republic, all power flows from the people. And again, it's a rights-based government. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal. They are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. The Declaration lays the framework for the Constitution, and then in the Constitution, the whole idea is to create a republic in which all power flows from the people to their duly elected representatives, who are the stewards of the money and power given to them by the people, to then create a government of, by, and for the people that every day is supposed to promote and protect the interests of the American people, and first and last in all things, trade, immigration, you name it, and to secure the inherent unalienable rights and take none of them away. Right. So what our founders did, again, in Philadelphia, summer of 1787, they put in place a government that they believe reflected those values and their view of imperfect human nature. Again, imperfect human beings, given these amazing inherent rights by our creator. How do you protect those rights, take none of them away, at the same time don't trust human nature? You construct a constitutional republic. You create the Article 1 branch with its legislative powers, the Article 2 branch with the executive power, the Article 3 with judicial, diffusion of power at the federal level, the idea of federalism, which is kind of a fiction, as is a constitutional republic at this moment in D.C., diffusing power even down to the state level, so that you can never consolidate power to abuse the inherent rights of the American people. The progressives rejected that in its entirety. They said, we don't believe that that's the right way to approach governance. We believe that if you were to have everybody claiming their inherent rights against the government, you'll actually slow down progress, Michele. They really believe that's why they vehemently rejected a rights-based government, because if you and I, along with hundreds of millions of other Americans, were say, hey, government shouldn't be in that aspect of my life because it's abusing my inherent rights, that slows down progress. And their whole idea was to create this efficient administrative state to lead to greater progress. You can't have every individual claiming rights, and then you've got to consolidate power. And that's what they've done. And one of the points I make in the book, Michele, they've taken the legislative and judicial and put a lot of it into the executive branch, where most of the administrative state resides. And now you have these departments and agencies acting as legislators, executives, and judicial. And at a certain point, if you are unelected, unaccountable, you begin to become authoritarian and dictate to the American people, you dirty little peasants don't know what's best for you. This is what you have to do.
And then those who have been elected can just say, hey, look, that's what the EPA says we got to do. That's what we got to do. So
exactly.
It takes the responsibility off of the elected officials as well, correct?
You hit on something that I think is a dirty little secret in D.C. the legislative branch over the course of most of the 20th century, and I think they really capitulated, others have made the point, and I cite them in the book, really the late 1960s, early 1970s, that Congress kind of just said, we capitulate on our legislative governing authorities. We're going to subdelegate to these unelected bureaucrats in the executive branch. We are going to send them, Michele, people ask, why do they keep on sending 4,000 and 5,000 page bills? Why do they keep on passing these things when they haven't even read them? Well,
Right.
That's kind of the point. They frame out in general kind of what's supposed to happen, send it to the bureaucrats in the various departments and agencies who put a fine point on it with their statutes and regulations, therefore are doing the real governing. So then they can go back to their district, these elected officials, and go, that person at the EPA, FDA, they passed this regulation. I think it's terrible. I'm going to go back to DC. I'm going to fight for you. I'm going to fight for your rights and all that. As they're passing these bills, giving them those rights to basically duck responsibility. A lot of these guys don't want to have to make hard decisions because, Michele, my dad was in the House for 10 years. I've been in DC for most of the last 25. You can bank on most elected officials, not all, but most, as being experts in self-preservation. No, I'm serious. They want to duck a lot of these hard things because this is the pinnacle of their career.
Yeah.
They've always wanted to be a congressman. They've always wanted to be a senator. If you can duck enough of these hard things, go back to your voters and say, wasn't my fault. You can get reelected. You get to come back for another 2 years or 6 years. You get to be here and enjoy all the privileges of being a congressman or a senator without actually having done what you're supposed to do.
Why didn't the founders see this coming and put term limits in the Constitution?
I think they thought, first of all, remember until about turn of the 20th century, I think it was 4 years was the average tenure of a congressman in the House. They just didn't, that was not their thinking. They did not think that someone would want to be in Congress as a career politician.
Yeah.
It was something that was foreign to them. They also thought that what they had put in place with regular elections every 2 years, every 6 years, and being accountable to the American people, which, by the way, elected officials, even though they have ducked a lot of their legislative and governing responsibilities, have also insulated themselves. That's why you see an 80% incumbency retention in most elections.
Right.
That founders, I truly believe, thought that regular elections being confronted with accountability to the American people would bring about better behavior. They also believed that a free and honest press would provide transparency for the American people to make better decisions. So a lot of the things they put in place have been warped and twisted and corrupted. So now you find yourselves in 2024 going, yeah, I'm pretty sure this isn't what the founders intended at all on any level.
Yeah. So Russiagate.
Yep. Yeah.
Let's talk.
This to me.
This you lay out in the book how like this has been brewing, and then there was a tipping point, and the tipping point, in your opinion, was Russiagate. This hoax that somehow Russia put Trump in the White House.
Right.
How do you defend that? I love the good folks at besthotgrill.com. And with football being back, so is tailgating. Whether it's Friday Night Lights, Saturday College, Pro Sundays, Solaire Tailgate, infrared grills, well, they set up super fast. They heat up super quickly. I mean, it takes 3 minutes to get to searing hot temperatures. These are just like the big backyard Solaires. A Solaire grill will make you the master of the tailgate with the juiciest, most flavorful food in the parking lot. This thing is amazing, folks. And the fast grilling times, well, they leave you more time to enjoy the pregame festivities. They also cool down really fast, so you're not going to miss a minute of the game. The USA-made Solaire Anywhere, Everywhere, and All About infrared grills are portable. They're perfect for any grilling on the go. I'm talking about a picnic, camping, RVs, boating, but especially tailgating. Amaze your tailgating friends with the great food you grill with your Solaire infrared grill. Learn more about these fantastic grills. I've got one. I love it. I swear by it. And Solaire's Try Before You Buy demo rental program at besthotgrill.com. That's besthotgrill.com, besthotgrill.com.
So I defend it by saying it had nothing to do with any of that. I mean, they used a fake dossier, the Steele dossier, which they knew was a conspiracy theory. The FBI did. They still secured 4 FISA warrants. and went after the duly elected president of the United States. And I think for the course of 4 years, really tried to perform a slow moving coup against Donald J. Trump. And the whole reason I say that, and the whole reason they did that, Michelle, because unlike every other president since Reagan, Donald Trump rejected the premise. He rejected the premise that the administrative state should be deciding foreign policy, a lot of domestic policy, and he showed up in January of 2017 as the great outsider. And I make this point in the first chapter. Donald J. Trump was such a great outsider that when he showed up in D.C., January of 2017, he thought we were still operating as a constitutional republic, that as the duly elected representative of the American people, I'm the one who decides, for the most part, a lot of domestic and foreign policy. And especially, as the head of the executive branch, I am running the executive branch. And the administrative state and the Democrats, and quite frankly, a lot of establishment Republicans, and I refuse to call them corporate media, the corporate propagandists, said, we don't think so. We think that the status quo has already been decided. We decide. And for having the temerity to reject the premise and say that you decide, we're going to whip up all kinds of conspiracy theories. So I say Russiagate, Ukrainian quid pro quo, a lot of this lawfare. I've told Trump this. If you peel it all away, it comes down to who decides, who governs, fundamental question for this country, and really a clash between two very different governing philosophies, constitutional republic versus an administrative state. So a lot of what you're seeing, Michelle, when you cut away the noise and all of that, that's what it comes down to. Two very fundamental issues, who decides and what is our governing philosophy. That's where we're at.
Let me ask you this. If Donald Trump, let's say, same kind of outsider in a nicer bit of packaging, let's say a woman from the corporate world who spoke more elegantly, had a very cool, calm, collected temper, what was still a rank outsider,
yes.
would she have been treated the same way, do you think?
I do. And let me put a point. If she had said, I reject the premise that these unelected bureaucrats decide, because let's not forget, Michelle, Donald Trump's election was not only a rejection of Obama, it was a rejection of Bush and the neocon, nation building, kind of globalist, I would say warmongering. And I actually wrote in George W. Bush's White House that was a rejection of not only Obama, but Bush, Trump. Trump shows up and goes, hey, I have a different approach to foreign policy. And these folks said, no, we've already decided really for the last however many decades what our foreign policy should be. And Trump said, well, elections should have consequences. And again, I'm parsing this down and kind of compressing all these, but elections should have consequences. I've decided what our foreign policy is. I was just elected by the American people. And they said, no, that's not even, we're not even having that conversation. Dirty little peasants don't know what's best for them. We've already decided. I think if a smart, astute, sharp, well-packaged woman showed up and said, I'm the duly elected president of the United States. I believe that as the head of the executive branch, I decide a lot of domestic and foreign policy. No, I reject the premise of the administrative state. You guys do not decide because you're unelected. You're supposed to be doing the will of the people, serving them first and foremost every day. Yeah, I do think she'd be attacked. I think they would attempt to destroy her.
They would find something. They would attempt to destroy her.
They would find something 100%, because if you reject the premise, that to them is an existential threat. And that's why Donald Trump is considered an existential threat to their form of democracy, which has nothing to do with representative democracy, just so we're clear. That's why he's such a threat, because he rejects the premise.
So where do we go from here? Like, this is so disheartening for those of us who revere the founding of this country, and I'm not talking about slavery. I'm not talking about the warts. I'm talking about
imperfect human beings in an imperfect world doing what they thought was best to create a constitutional republic, representative democracy, to protect all those things we discussed. But are they perfect? Absolutely not.
Right.
Not even close.
Correct. But it's still the risk that they took, the belief that they had, the idealism and the ideas, which Frederick Douglass believed in as well, and so many others. You take those and you go, okay, no, we're so far from that now. Is there any way back? And if there is, what's it going to take?
So there's three things, and I discuss these in the book. One is, again, most of the administrative state resides inside the executive branch. The head of the executive branch, duly elected president of the United States, who, if he rejects the premise, let's just say Donald Trump, January of 2025, comes back into the White House. He's rejected the premise. Day one, he has to get a couple things right, Michelle, which he did not in his first term. there is a very important position in every administration called the Office of Presidential Personnel, PPO. The first 3 years were kind of a disaster for Trump, did not get it right, did not have people in the various departments and agencies that actually were on the same page with him. So if the head of the executive branch comes in, gets PPO right, and there's about 5,000, give or take, political positions each administration gets, it's called the Plum Book, about 400 or 500 important decision makers, secretaries, deputy secretaries, all those assistant secretaries. If he gets those 400 or 500 positions nailed and says, we are going to devolve and dismantle the administrative state, return power back to the people, to the Article 1 branch, legislative governing authority, which I have a solution on that front as well, and where we're going to turn judicial powers back to the Article 3 branch, he begins to implement through a whole series of reforms, which I lay out in the last chapter. It will be political war like we've never seen before because people want the status quo because they have vested interest in it.
Right.
So that's the first step. Step two, I write a little bit about this, Chevron deference. The Supreme Court has stepped up this summer and said, we also reject the premise of this administrative state because Chevron deference has been in place for 40 years, in which judges were to defer to these unelected bureaucrats' statutes and regulations. The Supreme Court this summer said, that's not how it works. We're not going to do that because it calls into question the idea of an independent judiciary not rubber stamping these edicts in statutes and regulations, which was a big deal to the founders. I remind people, we kind of have this impression, Article 1, Article 2, Article 3, isn't that great? The founders really wanted an independent judiciary because the British courts at the time of the American Revolution were essentially rubber stamping the edicts of King George III, and Parliament, the King's Minister said, no, we want an independent judiciary that will be as a check on the power of the executive. So the Supreme Court said, we're not doing Chevron deference anymore. Also, I think one of the cases I wish I'd written about, I didn't, but I'm going to talk about it here with you, is the SEC tribunals, in which the Supreme Court said the Security and Exchange Commission tribunals, the administrative law tribunals, are unconstitutional. And what takes place with a lot of these departments and agencies, Michelle, is that they have their tribunals that 90% of the time with the SEC ruled in favor of the SEC. And the Supreme Court said no, calls into question independent judiciary. Oh, by the way, annihilates the idea of a Seventh Amendment right to trial by jury. And that, to me, is one of the things that, again, I want to highlight with the machinery of the Republic. The greatest protector of our natural inherent rights, it's not a Bill of Rights. We have a lovely Bill of Rights. It's amazing. It's a parchment barrier. The real protector of our natural inherent rights is the diffusion of power, because consolidated power is the greatest threat to our inherent rights. If power is diffused, it's really hard to abuse those natural rights. The third thing I will say is a potential, how do we get back to being a constitutional republic? More of the American people have to fully understand what's going on. I think a lot of them have been asleep in the light. They have not gotten the truth of what's going on. I've tried to, in this book, as best I can in my limited way, communicate to the American people. I've been in D.C. 25 years. I've watched this. I've been a close observer. This is what's going on. You need to start asking questions. And I start the book by saying you only get to the truth of the matter by asking questions. And I tell my kids this all the time. You are to question everything, except for me. I'm your benevolent dictator.
That's right.
But to question everything to get to the truth of the matter, and the American people need to start asking more questions. And so I hope the book kind of gives some illumination and clarity. But if all of these things come together in a span of 4 years, say starting in January of 2025, I think tremendous strides could be made in getting us back to restoring, on the path to restoring, because Michelle, it's not going to all happen in 4 years. Let's be realistic. We didn't get here overnight.
Right.
12 years is more like it. So an America first person that believes in constitutional republic, restoration of full restoration of our natural inherent rights. It's about 12 years. And at some point, Congress is going to have to step up to the plate and say, we also reject the premise, we're going to starve the beast. The House needs to say we have the purse strings. We're not going to continue blindly funding this. Yeah. And oh, by the way, we're going to step up to the plate and we're going to have to do some hard decisions here that might or might not endanger us being reelected.
Right, right. And you can I can hear it already. The Democrats will come back and say, those Republicans, they're shutting off the purse strings and they're pushing Granny off a cliff and all your children are going to die and women won't be able to get abortions. That's what they will do, and they'll scare the hell out of her. Are you feeling overwhelmed by the increasing cost of health insurance? Have you had enough of not having control over your healthcare dollars? Introducing ShareRight, healthcare done the right way. At ShareRight, you're not just a number, you're part of a caring community. And forget about paying excessive premiums. With ShareRight, you stand to save 30 to 50% compared to health insurance. Think about what you could do with all those savings. My goodness, but it's more than just savings. ShareRight ensures that you have access to the care you deserve precisely when you need it, from routine checkups to unexpected emergencies. With ShareRight, your healthcare is their top priority. So empower yourself today by taking control of your healthcare costs. Visit shareright.org/Tafoya, Tafoya, to learn more and see how much you can save. Visit shareright.org/Tafoya. That's shareright.org/Tafoya for healthcare done the right way. Those Republicans, they're shutting off the purse strings, and they're pushing Granny off a cliff, and all your children are going to die, and women won't be able to get abortions. That's what they will do, and they'll scare the hell out of everyone.
This, to me, is one of the frustrating things with the Republican Party. Again, having been here for way too long in the D.C. area, they always seem to be caught by surprise. Like, have you not thought ahead? Have you not thought, like you just said, they're going to come at you from these different angles. So let's maybe think a few steps ahead and go, when they say that, we're going to do this.
Yes.
When they try to make this attack, we'll do this. Instead, they're like always on the defensive.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is one of the great frustrations as a conservative Republican, registered Republican the day I turned 18, to the point of, dear God, we really are the stupid party at times. Maybe we should stop doing this at some point and figure out how we're going to think ahead and win these fights.
Last thing I would ask of you, because you project what could happen if Trump, the Republican nominee, is elected. What if he's not? And what if Kamala Harris is our president in January of 2025? How much worse does this get?
I think it is a more terrifying proposition than I could probably imagine at this point. And the reason I say that, she has a lot of socialist tendencies, as does Tim Walz. And you know this.
I know this firsthand. Yes, absolutely.
That these guys tend to believe that the government, the state, is all powerful, deciding we will dictate to the American people what will take place on a whole host of fronts. So if you think the administrative state is becoming a bad actor, and I think it's been a bad actor for a long time, have some people in the White House that are fully on the same page with the administrative state actors, with this unbelievable power to dictate to the American people. Yeah, sorry, no more gas stoves. Sorry, you can all have to have electric vehicles. Actually, social credit scores, you've been very naughty online, so we're going to have to restrict your travel. I can see all of this happening in a relatively short amount of time. Like you said, these things happen slowly and then all of a sudden. And the thing that also concerns me too, Michelle, they're not importing illegal immigrants out of the goodness of their heart. They are going for one party rule. And if you had another 4 years of Kamala Harris with another 10 to 12 million, which I think is kind of a low figure, but let's just say 10 to 12 million, put them into key battleground states. That's what I do for most of my life, is actually political operative. If I was immoral and unethical and political power was my precious, I would put them into 7 to 10 key states and get as many of them on a path to citizenship, get them on the voter rolls, get them a ballot. Republicans would never see the White House, at least for the foreseeable future, if ever. That's where I think we could end up if we're not very, very careful on November 5th.
You know, it's amazing because I think people think, oh gosh, this could never happen in America. This is no way. And it's human nature. Again, getting back to being human, we see it in other places in the world. Why wouldn't it happen here?
So progressives viewed, again, history like this as this perpetual upward climb to the perfection of mankind and the perfectly rational state, end of history. I view history more like this, Michelle. It's basically like this, with cyclical. We advance in time, things change, technology changes, but it's cyclical in nature because of human nature. And I tell people all the time, I'm an evangelical Christian. Even if you don't adhere to those beliefs, you should read the Bible. You should read Shakespeare. You should read all of these things that are great commentary on human nature, because the more times change, the more things remain the same because of imperfect human nature. And we keep on cycling through this idea of it'll never happen here. We're better than them. It's that chronological snobbery that C.S. Lewis writes about. we're better than them. We're more enlightened. We're just better human beings. We would never let that happen here in this country. You're not studying history and you're not studying human nature.
Well, now I'm terrified. But
I think this is one of those moments of clarity that the American people, there is a path forward. I don't want to be like, oh my gosh, all is lost, because I'm the eternal optimist. I truly believe
I join
that
you
we've
in
got
that.
a shot. We
Yeah.
do have a shot, and I have to tell you, one of the things I do besides write books every now and then and do political commentary is, again, American majority action. I put my money where my mouth is, Michelle. I truly believe that action is the soul of restoration, that you have to be proactive, and we have to restore the republic. We have to restore our natural inherent rights, but that only happens. Politics is policy. You only get that because of political change. We're doing a massive AB generation, AB chase, absentee ballot chase, and early voting push in Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, North Carolina. The biggest project I've ever done, 1,500 people at least.
You didn't
in those
say
four
Pennsylvania.
States. I have people that I'm allied with that are working in Georgia, Pennsylvania. Some work in North Carolina. I think Virginia's actually in play.
I do
I'm
too.
telling you. So
I do too.
I say all of that to give people hope. I've looked at the real numbers, Michelle, and by that I mean not poll numbers, which I love a good poll. I'm a political nerd. Quinnipiac showing Trump up by 1, and in September of 2020, Biden was up 10, 11-point switch. Gallup with its electorate saying Republicans are going to be +3 in this electorate in November. Huge step in the right direction. Trump's leading on 9 of the 10 key issues. Those are great. Love it. Might or might not be true 40 days from now.
Yeah.
What really counts are the fundamental numbers of how big is your ballot universe and what is the partisan registration advantage in the 7 key states. Let me explain a little bit. In Arizona, Republicans now have about a 75,000 ballot advantage on the permanent absentee ballot list over Democrats. Huge step in the right direction. They are about 300,000 up on partisan registration over Democrats in Arizona, whereas in 2020, it was like 120,000, 130,000, somewhere in that range. So it's more than doubled in partisan registration in Arizona over the last 4 years. Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, Democrats have lost about 300,000 in their partisan registration advantage since 2020. They have about 300,000 fewer absentee ballot requests. Republicans' ballot requests have significantly increased in a state that Biden only won by 80,000 votes. But more importantly, Michelle, a lot of people have finally figured out, I have been beating this drum for pretty much the last 2 years, you better be focused on generating more ballots among mid to low propensity voters. If we can get them to request a ballot, 80% of them will turn out. Then you chase in all of the ballots that exist in that universe to no less than 80%. And then you get the people that don't have a ballot to go out and vote early for a whole host of reasons. It's also the economics of early voting. Please save me money, save Donald Trump money. If Donald Trump can win the AB and EV vote, early vote, or come into election day narrowly behind in these key battleground states, he will win. And the reason I say that is because Republicans crushed Democrats on election day voting. So that's been really what I've been focused on the last 2 years and been really developing, and have chase teams in those 4 states that I mentioned. I've got people that I know who have teams in Pennsylvania and Georgia doing the exact same work.
I encourage people to get the book, American Leviathan, and read it. It's a good read, and it's
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's what I love about the way you write is it's really accessible. I think people get nervous about opening these books and going, "How am I going to understand?" You're going to understand it.
I appreciate you saying that, because it's been my fear that people look at administrative state. That's a pretty dry topic.
Yeah.
To make it a very historical narrative that's approachable, so people go, because the goal is it was never to write some 300 or 400 page book on the long history of the administrative state,
right?
But to write a brief, concise history that leads us to where we are today and go, I hope you have illumination. I hope you have clarity. And I hope that it will inspire you actually to realize we have a fight in front of us.
Yeah.
It is a political fight like we haven't seen. People say this all the time, Michelle. This is my last point. 2024 is absolutely the most important election of our lifetime because of what's at stake. We're at a tipping point. Yeah. Things have been accelerating. We're either going to go capitulate to this whole idea of statism and the state being salvation and the state being invasive in every part of our lives. We're going to go, no, we're not going to do that. We want a republic back. We want our rights restored. And we're going to go back to where we have duly elected representatives and get them more accountable to the American people, but who are accountable to the American people doing the real governing of this country and reflecting the actual will of the people.
Right. Amen. Ned Ryun, the book is American Leviathan. Get it. I always end my podcast saying, be brave, do good. Be brave enough to open this book and read it, and do good by giving it to a friend. There you go.
Thanks, Michelle.
Buy 2 copies. Ned Ryun, thank you. And we'll see you next time.
I appreciate it. Thank you.